Kyle here from allmediareviews.blogspot.com. Thank you if you've recently subscribed. Please subscribe if you have not subscribed. Doing King's X video series today, this week, this month, probably into next month. Just finished Fate's Warning. Did the Deer Hunter earlier this year, and Kevin Gilbert and Marillion last year, and some other stuff. It's some other fun stuff going on. Oops. Anyway, I'm gonna do the next album. I'm doing them just in chronological order. And then I'm going to do a ranking video like I've done with the others. Although I'm going to do the songs videos at some point when I have the chance. But today it's the second official album from King's X. The follow-up to their debut album, Out of the Silent Planet, Gretchen Goes to Nebraska, which came out June 27th, 1989. And the interesting thing is I bought this on CD. I don't think I never bought this on cassette tape. I bought the ones following it. But it's interesting. My book, I always think about this. My CD book doesn't have, it has a story. My CD book doesn't have the complete story, which I came to learn later. It's got Jerry Gaskill wrote the little story. So it's King's X's second album. It's a concept album. I mean, as I've said, they formed in effect in 1979. Now, I have been reading the oral history, that book that came out in 2019 from Greg Prado. Though the more I read this, I realize that while he's technically the author, the oral, quote unquote, it refers to oral history. It's basically a narrative. It's like interviews without the actual questions, but just with the members and people that have knowledge and experience and memories, anecdotes, their stories. That's what really tells the story chronologically. He just did the editing, basically. I've learned a couple things, though. I'm 70 pages into it, so I'm in the Gretchen period, just about to start the area they're talking about Gretchen. I had in the sneak preview video, in effect, sneak preview was not their first name. They were known as The Edge originally. Well, they played with some other bands, including Phil Keggy in Missouri, but their sort of first official name, and they had a couple other members come and go between when they were known as The Edge and known as Sneak Preview. So, you learn stuff that that documentary, I think it's called Then, that came out in the late 90s. They told a fair amount about that, but it's been many years since I've seen that, though there's some of it I watched a couple years ago on YouTube. Some of it's on YouTube, I think, or maybe most of it. Anyway, so Gretchen Goes to Nebraska, I don't know if it wasn't the second album I listened to, because what happened was I bought, like at the time in 96 or whatever, I bought all their albums almost all at once, so I gotta pause for a second here. Yeah, I bought, what did I do with it? Well, here's my CD. Again, it's on Atlantic, though technically it was still Megaforce. Here it is. I bought them all at once, really, between the cassettes. I remember I had all the albums on between cassette and CD, and this one I probably found just first on CD. I like the picture, which, oops, not bad, on the back. Of course, Out of the Silent Planet, they have the opening track on this album is the name of their previous record, like Led Zeppelin did with, Houses of the Holy, and, other bands have done that, so that reference. But You Are Here, of course, now the Kevin Gilbert video podcast officially on YouTube is titled that as well, though I don't think that has anything to do with it. Although the guys in King's X were friends with Kevin, or knew Kevin. They knew Kevin. I mean, in fact, I wish there was some more references in this book. The Fate's Warning book wouldn't have really anything on Kevin, probably, but, although the transatlantic thing almost would have. But anyway, and Spock's beard. Anyway, but, yeah, this was 89. It was the second album, and I'm reading about it. I have the vinyl, too, I'll show. This is, it says an original pressing, but I think I got this online. They reissued these. I should buy them both, and I got Doug to sign this one, too. And this is pretty much their only concept album, I think. Yeah. I mean, they've done some slightly conceptual work, some songs that sort of, but really, I mean, Faith, Hope, Love, you could say there's a concept around that, the album that follows this, but yeah, this is a first pressing, just Megaforce Worldwide, barely even played. So, and stuff I've read about it, and I'll learn more about it as I read that book. But as I know that when they released it, the band itself, like Ty specifically, I think it was, really, and like I'm thinking of interviews I've heard, watched, read from him over the last, especially like the last decade and a half, is that I don't want to use the word pretentious, but like this was, because the word pretentious is not used like it's really supposed to be. The word pretentious means basically pretending, fake, insincere. But it was definitely seen as sort of like, not like, we're going to come up with a title name, Gretchen Goes to Nebraska. I mean, it's a story, to me it always came across as like this girl on a journey, in effect. And I know the story that Jerry Gaskell wrote, that I think is, I should just look again, is on here too. This is the lyrics sheet. Yeah, this is the story. Has like, I know like the scene, like the sort of Alice in Wonderland or Wizard of Oz element, especially Wizard of Oz, and like Nebraska and Kansas. They obviously, Ty was from Mississippi, Doug was from Illinois, and Jerry is from New Jersey. I was learning in the book, the oral history. But they obviously formed in Missouri in the late 70s, technically, or 1980. But Missouri, Nebraska, Kansas, that sort of heartland, middle of the country kind of element. I wonder if that was part of where they came up with Nebraska, because I don't know if they had any ties to Nebraska. Yeah, I forgot about the I should just get both this. The first two records, you can find them. The casing's not in perfect shape, but it was, it's an element, they don't love. The time especially, it felt like it was, and like the critics didn't like their whole approach to, we're going to write some sort of silly fantasy, concept album in the late 80s, when, again, and even into the 90s, that was out of fashion. They weren't, if this would have been in the 70s, it would have probably been more well received, I think, at the time. Now, that being said, I think because the music still was well received, and then it's over time, even more well received by the fans, by new fans, and by critics even, it's become, in a lot of ways, their most well-known record, their most appreciated, their most mentioned, the most referenced. This is the album they're really the most well-known for, and they probably always will be. Even though it's an album, again, it's a silly name, but I've sort of grown to appreciate it. It definitely represents the prog, art rock spirit, sci-fi, imaginative, this is what music can do, it's very creative. And all of a sudden Planet had some of that, and that was based on as I figured out, it was a C.S. Lewis book or chapter or something like that. It was a book. Even the artwork, I've always felt like the artwork is very storybook. It's like, yeah, this looks like something out of The Wizard of Oz, or out of some British literature or literature from a century or two ago. Yeah, The Wizard of Oz. Wizard of Oz, much as I love Ghost World, it's kind of considered like my favorite story of all time, my favorite movie, my favorite book of all time, whatever. So I saw that, I kind of thought, yeah, I kind of can feel that. Even like reading that little story from Jerry, I kind of felt like, yeah, this is like something out of The Wizard of Oz. So the music itself, though, beyond the whole lyrics, it's not the whole melodramatic concept rock opera that sometimes are made, like the Who's Tommy or whatever, or I don't know. It musically folds. It's like what the Deer Hunter has done, and a lot of other concept albums where it is sort of a story you can imagine, but it's very much of the music still comes first. And I'll say that Out of the Silent Planet, the opening track, probably in some ways was the song that really won me over by this band. And when I'm making a track list, it's still very high on my list. I love that track. I love the sort of atmosphere, vibe, the groove, and sort of the way it kind of builds and the layers. There aren't that many other King's X songs, actually, that have that specific sort of feeling and atmosphere with especially like the gang vocals. It's like going on a trip, going on a journey, telling a tale. It's sort of setting the mood. And then Over My Head is like their most energetic song, and that's probably in a lot of ways still their most well-known song, and it still holds up. Even though it's probably most thought of as a live track, and of course there's some live applause at the end of it. Not necessarily from a show, I don't think so. I don't know, when I get into more of the details of this, I'll learn more about that, but that's a song that I always tell people well, you want to hear what King's X is like, here's a good example. It's got that heavy, punchy, energetic, just kicking riff. Probably more energetic than anything on the first album. And not one of the most energetic songs. It's one of those riffs you can't get out of your head. And of course, Doug live became sort of, almost attached to doing it. And I think he burnt down on it over some time. But whatever, how many shows they've done since this album came out, I would estimate probably a few thousand. They played it almost every show, and probably at least 50, 60, 70% of those, he's done like this, they've done this little groove where he tells like a story, a little like tale, a little like relatable thing that kind of, it's sort of not a preaching song, but sort of like a prayer or a, therapeutic sort of, it's not a sermon exactly, but it's sort of, he's spilling his guts, or he's just kind of emptying his head. It's like a journal or a diary in some ways about society, his life, things that he thinks about, things that bug him, whatever. Then Summerland, it's just like, all this time playing Over My Head. Summerland's another just key, significant track. Very kind of heavy, power chordy, riffy, but atmospheric. I always think Summerland, they talk about like the seasons, and then I think more of terms of the story, like this girl's walking around, her name is Gretchen, and she's trying to find her way home, or she's lost, and she's caught in some desert or some kind of field where it's warm, but then as you go through the rest of the album, the other key track when I first got into this band and this album specifically was Pleiades. I love this, again, the mood, even though that's not like real like balls to the wall groovy fast. The atmosphere on that is just terrific. And I guess I was reading that was a song that Ty wrote with one of, I think it was his roommate. It was not even supposed to be for their band, but he liked it so much, the band liked it so much, but it was co-written by another, the guy's name I should know it, Greg something maybe. Anyway, I'll have to go back and mention that in a future video. Every other track on here, listening to this again, there's like a ton of just like heavy, groovy, infectious riffs. Everybody knows a little bit of something. The lyrics for that always reminds me of sort of, everyone has some knowledge that's in the universe and on the planet. So it's like, so-and-so might be good at math. Another person may be really good at engineering. Another person may be really good at poetry. Another person may be a really good chef. Another person may be, an art history savant. That's kind of the whole thing, is everyone has knowledge about certain things. Not everyone knows everything. And it's sort of, it definitely kind of is an uplifting kind of thing, like, yeah, I'm the expert. I'm the savant on this. You can't take that away from me. I may not know everything about the thing that you are so knowledgeable about, but I know something about, Then The Difference, that one in the Garden of St. Anne's on the Hill. That's more mellow. They played that live a few years back. I remember that was kind of surprising. I always wanted to see them play this whole album live, and I don't think they ever did it. I know there was a lot of desire for them to do it. I'll Never Be the Same ends the first side. Another groovy track, Mission, There's Trouble in the Kingdom, this is kind of somewhat fantasy storybook, but again, it's not getting too cheesy. Fall on Me, I know a lot of people that love that track. That kind of, it stops and starts and stops and starts, but it kind of builds, it has a great crescendo to it. Don't Believe It, It's Easier Said Than Done. I always think of that song as It's Easier Said Than Done. That's that kind of back and forth. It's easier said. And then he says, the lyrics go, to get up and run. Like, it's kind of to me like a don't give up thing. It's like if you're lost, talking about maybe the story and anything in life, if you're lost with something, don't give up. you'll eventually get there. Send a message, there's trouble. That's the song I was actually thinking of. Don't believe. Well, see, those two songs kind of blend. I mean, there's a great flow to this record, and that's one reason why I think in some ways it stands out more than some of their others, just a bit. The Burning Down is a nice kind of ending ballad. It kind of sets the mood and kind of closes the story out in some way. I mean, it's kind of less is more in a way. This whole album, how long is it? It's like about 40 minutes, maybe 45 minutes. No, it's actually 52. Well, and I actually got it on one record. Now I wonder if the re-release is actually 2. It's a double. It might be a gatefold. I really need to pick that up. Because I know I passed on because I got this version a few years before that they did re-release it. My whole point is that while this album, it's an epic album. It's a story album, and it flows really well. And while it seems like it's long, at the same time it doesn't feel long, if that makes any sense. And so that's part of why it stands out. At the same time, I think on some of their other records they had more like kind of go-to like favorite tracks, if that makes sense. But when it comes down to it, this is the one that sort of I'm kind of, as an album lover, this is like the best sort of the album that I kind of look at. Now I'm trying to spoil the rankings and stuff, but because I really feel strongly about so many of the records, but from an album, because it's a concept album, and from a flow standpoint, I don't think they ever did anything better, really. But I'm revisiting stuff. So like with the Fates Warning rankings and some of the other all these ranking videos, some of my rankings have changed that they would have been a few years ago. So, but anyway, Gretchen Goes to Nebraska, released in 1989. Looking at the year of 1989, who am I kidding? I'm done the videos for this. It was my album of the year. I have Rush's Presto, Perfect Symmetry from Fate's Warning, The Real Thing from Faith No More, which is really my favorite Faith No More album. When Dream and Day Unite from Dream Theater, that's your top 5. So you have Dream Theater, Faith No More, Fate's Warning, and Rush, and then King's X. King's X beat them all out for me. You have Marillion, my favorite band, number 6 at season's end. So 89, I've always felt like 89 was a very good, at least very top-heavy year. Oranges and Lemons from XTC. Push Comes to Shove, that's my favorite XTC. Tears for Fears, The Seeds of Love. That's an album I probably still need to revisit. I've liked more in recent years. Some other stuff that year, Sabotage's Gutter Ballet. Stormfront from Billy Joel, that we didn't start the fire. Queen the Miracle, that was 89, came out June of 89, so that would have been going into my 8th grade year. So I would have been, 13. I just turned 13, actually, because I was young for my age, for my class. The Miracle by Queen, Nothing Faced by Voivod, Watchtower's Control and Resistance. Oops, I keep on going down here. Watchtower's Control and Resistance, Peter Gabriel's Passion, ABWH, Lenny Kravitz, Love Rule. Interesting, King's X Lenny Kravitz thing I thought when I first got into them. TNT's Intuition, Linda Ronstadt, Aaron Neville, album Cry Like a Rainstorm, Howl Like the Wind, and Thinking Plagues in This Life. That's my 89 list, but I didn't have Giraffe on here. That would have been a tough decision. I don't know if Giraffe would have beaten out King's X, but yeah, so what's your take on this second album from King's X, Gretchen Goes to Nebraska? Is it their best record? Of course, it also is the second of 4 consecutive albums they worked with and was produced by Sam Taylor. I think, they really labored over this album from just reading a little bit about it in the book here. I think they probably, I don't know if they ever, I know the whole period of Sam Taylor, they ended up, just working long amounts of days, weeks on this thing. I think they may have not worked more on a new album maybe in their whole history. They, because they were trying to kind of, piggyback on the momentum they were getting from Out of the Silent Planet. Where did that go? Here it is. And, that was kind of it. But, you can easily see a progression. So, anyway. But thank you for watching. Like I said, please subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Tomorrow, hopefully, you'll be able to do Faith, Hope, Love, and then I may be able to do another video depending on time on Wednesday because it's the Jewish holiday. I'm not going to be working. I got stuff I have to do, but on Wednesday, Yom Kippur. So, but again, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.